This webinar is designed to support centre staff following the changes to the reformed functional skills qualifications and to build on and support key trends that we've found coming through following recent exams. Before we start, I'd like to draw your attention to the top right-hand side of your screen, where you should be able to see a small dialog box. From here, you'll be able to type your questions. I'll aim to answer all questions at the end of the webinar. With me in the room today is Bethan, Senior Corporate Customer Service Manager and Qualification Development Team Leader, who will be assisting with answering questions. You'll also see there's a facility to raise your hand. Please use this if you experience any technical issues during the webinar, such as if you're unable to hear me or see the presentation slides. After we finish today, I will close the webinar, and once this is done, you will be presented with a short survey. You'll need to wait a few seconds before the survey pops up. However, please do complete this for us, as feedback is a really important tool for Highfield to ensure that we are meeting your needs and expectations. So let's get started. In today's webinar, we're aiming to look at question types and staggered answers, comparisons as a teaching tool, conveyance of information, ideas and opinions as a teaching tool, the differences between features and devices, the effective use of organisational markers. If we begin with question types and staggered answers, it's really important that learners are aware of the format of the exams and where question types may carry more than one mark. Questions with multiple marks imply that more than one answer is needed. Where a question may be worth more than one mark, the latter mark or marks are usually dependent on answering the first mark correctly. So an example may be, what style of writing is used by the author of text B, and how does this meet the purpose of the text? Or something along the lines of, state the purpose of text B and give an example of a textual device that has been used to support this. Explain how the textual device identified supports the purpose of the text. So within that, if you had a text type where the purpose was persuade, then the writer may have used statistics as a textual device to reinforce the message or meaning. And again, we'll come a little bit later on to the difference between the features and devices. The only time where this might differ is where an indicated response is given in bold. So, for example, in text A, what two things are implied? So the learners are prompted to identify two things and to give additional answers. It's imperative that the learner uses the reference text to support their answer and not elicit a response using their own ideas or experiences. So within the example there where it stipulates in text A, the learner must extract the answer from that particular text. If we look at comparisons as a teaching tool, you'll note that the word contrast has been omitted from the reform qualification. It is not given at all now within the subject content, and a learner is expected to acknowledge that the comparison is that of similarities and differences. They need to understand that information and ideas on the same topic may differ across texts. Again, the learner must use the indicated text. So, for example, using text A and text B, compare the information provided about studying. So again, the learners are prompted to use indicative texts. We would be looking for effective use of connectives and conjunctions to demonstrate ability. Within level 1, we would expect a connective to be and, but, then, and so on. Whereas here we're looking to build on that with more sophisticated language, improving from then to furthermore, however, whereas. This will also help within writing where they're now expected to be using complex sentencing. If they're already actively using connectives and conjunctions, this will add to their, the sophisticated vocabulary. Conveyance of information, ideas and opinions as a teaching tool. So the question will place particular emphasis as to what needs to be conveyed and how. So an example here is using text A and text B, compare the information provided about studying and give 2 examples. Explain how this information has been conveyed. So typical or possible answers that we would expect to see then would be, for example, personalisation using first-person pronouns, punctuation to emphasise points, or the writer has used facts to support opinions. To give a comparative difference, they may say in text B there is minimal persuasive language, or the writer has used rhetorical questions, or there is lack of punctuation emphasis. So it's particularly about what needs to be conveyed. So for example, in this instance, it's the actual information that is given about studying. Other points to note is that for where that example related to information, you may have other questions that relate to ideas or opinions. So in that instance, the learner may wish to consider how the type of text determines how that is conveyed. So generally, if it's an opinion, it might be something that's given in a blog format, or it's a social media context. So again, these are other points that the learner needs to consider as to how information, ideas, or opinions are being conveyed. The differences between features and devices. Textual features include bold, italics, images, font, and font size. Whereas a textual device are things such as rhetorical questions, alliteration, statistics, similes, repetition, metaphors, punctuation, first-person perspective. These may also be impacted by the purpose of the text. Is it to instruct, to describe, explain, or persuade? And also maybe the text type. So an advert, an article, email, instructions, letter, or report, all of which allow the learner to demonstrate a narrative and explanatory ability in context. Further detail regarding this is available via our amplifications, which can be found in the qualification handbook. And I'll discuss that a little bit later on in the webinar. Also new to level 2 are organisational features and organisational markers. Organisational features are referred to as presentational features within the legacy qualification. So organisational features would be things such as a heading or a title, subheadings, bullet points, numbered list, etc. At level 1, these are referred to as structural features, but at level 2, the given subject content refers to them as organisational features. There is no difference except for the terminology used. Organisational markers are additional features that we may expect to find, such as a contents list or captions to images or a text box or footnotes. Please note that paragraphs are now awarded under subject content 28 and are not awarded via organisational features. Writing hints and tips. What we'd look for here is for learners to consider possible text types that could come up at an exam. So level 2 would be looking at things like an advert, an article, an email, instructions, letter, or report. So we'd suggest that teaching tasks incorporate these possible text types. And if they are studying with you for a particular vocational qualification, these can be linked in as well. So for example, if you worked within a construction environment, you may wish to ask your learner to create a health and safety report that could be displayed on the staff room notice board. Another example could be if you're working within a business admin environment, you send an email to a colleague requesting information. Or if you're working within a childcare environment, again, you could ask them to create a newsletter for parents. So they don't have to be taught as standalone activities. Remember, we want them to be functional tasks that can be used in a work and life context. You may wish to discuss with your learners organisational features that are typically found within each text type. So for example, within an article, we would expect to see a heading, a strapline, an author, columns, bullet points, image and graphics. If you have this set out as a standard practice, it becomes second nature to them. So if this should come up at an exam, they know what associated organisational features they could demonstrate competency for within that particular task. It will also help them to be aware of that when they're doing a reading exam, and they may be asked to identify organisational features found within text A, for example. The organisational markers, we've seen key trends coming through where, you know, this appears quite limited. So again, if you're going to be using these standalone teaching tasks, it might be an idea with your learners to explore what kind of organisational markers could be found within that. So if we build on the article where we've already got the heading, the strapline, the columns, etc., then an organisational marker that could be found within an article could be a caption to an image or a footnote. Again, if these become standard practice within the talk tasks, they do become second nature to the learners. So hopefully that's helped inform any teaching anomalies that you may have come across. I would encourage you to look at the amplifications that can be found within the qualification handbook. They do discuss and explore in greater detail all of the subject content that is currently found within the Reform qualifications. We also have a webinar for the amplifications that is available at the Highfield group on YouTube. This webinar will also be available on that link as well. Do we have any questions? Just to advise, a copy of the PowerPoint will be sent via email, so you can refer back to this at your leisure. And like I said, you can access the webinar via YouTube at the Highfield group. So one question we've just had through is, are we in the process of developing a handbook or a textbook to support the qualification? That's not in the pipeline at present. What I would suggest is that you do use the amplifications. They are quite explicit in their interpretation. Also on the Highfield website, if you search functional skills, you can access practice material. And I'd encourage you to look at the mark schemes because again, they are very, very explicit and broke down. They're very user-friendly. So you can quite clearly see what the expectations are there and what the learners will be awarded against. There is one sample paper available online for learners to attempt at present. We will be releasing future ones. I'm not sure what the time frame on that will be, but there will be additional papers available in the future.
Teresa, just in response to your question, we do have Skills Forward that you can use, which does provide resource on there. I'll be in touch with you just to give you the details and go through a bit more information on that.
Karen, your question regarding the marked papers, we'll come back to you with that. We just need to check with a colleague, so we will be in touch. Natasha, you have the same question as Teresa, so we will come back to you as well. Regards feedback on an actual marked exam, you can request a feedback report via your account manager. This is a paid-for service and it will give you feedback on individual candidates, but it won't necessarily say what question they failed on. It's a generic overview of performance within that particular exam. The amplifications are available in the qualification handbook. You can find this in the download area of the members homepage. Okay, if you should have any more questions, please feel free to submit those now. Alternatively, if you do think of something after the webinar has ended, you can email events@highfield.co.uk and we'll answer your query. Alternatively, thank you for your attendance today and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Okay, we don't appear to have any more questions. For those of you that we do need to come back to, we'll be back to you within 24 hours. Otherwise, thank you for attending.